What's up, guys? Jaxel here. Uh, Filling out another feature request, and this is going to be a tutorial for timers, countdowns, and stopwatches. Now, the last version of Scoreboard Assistant, it had a computer side timer. It just ran with your computer clock, and it just was very easy to make. But since Scoreboard Assistant is now built around the web, timers are a bit trickier. They're a bit more complicated because now you're managing clocks over the internet instead of on a computer. So keeping the time accurate. Oh, that's my cell phone. Anyway, keeping the timer accurate uh, requires some additional work. And this is going to be sort of an intermediate level guide because while the other guides I've posted are mostly about HTML, CSS, and a small amount of JavaScript, this is going to be a bit more math calculations. And unfortunately, I apologize for that. But if you're interested in timers, like I said, this was a request. So some of you are. Well, pay attention. All right, so we've got our package here. It's a package I already use, and we're going to add a page. And the create page has a new input form called a timer collection. Now, timers are going to be separated from the fields. So we're going to select a timer collection. I'm going to name this timers. And let's put it right at the front. All right, so now we have our timer collection, and we can start adding timers to it. Let's add our first timer. Unique key. Let's start with a simple stopwatch. So I'm going to name this watch. And this is going to be a stopwatch. There you go. And since it's a stopwatch, we want to start at 0 seconds, 0 minutes, and 0 hours. And so let's click save. Now there you go. Now we have a stopwatch. And I can click start, and the stopwatch counts. I can pause it, and then I can continue it. And then I can pause it again. I can reset the time back to 0. And when the time is reset, it will automatically store the last few laps in a list. Now this is a ephemeral list, so when you refresh the page, that list is going to be gone. So the page has been refreshed and it's gone. But one of the things you may have noticed is I'm refreshing the page, and the stopwatch is still running. That's because we have our stopwatches managed through the internet, so it's keeping atomic time based on the, the server time. Okay, so yeah. One of the things that you may not know about browsers, though, is when you navigate to a different page. So I'm going to navigate to a different page here. The timers, any loops you have running on the page you were just on, stops running. So this is why we're managing the time over the internet, so that even though the timer is stopped right now, when we go back to the page, it's going to sync itself back up, and the time will remain accurate. All right, so we have a stopwatch here, and let's add a second timer. We're going to call this one, this is a countdown, so let's call it countdown, and let's start this one at 30 minutes. There we go, and now we have a countdown. And the countdown, we're going to click start on that one, and now it's counting down. Easy enough. There you go, we've got counters. But of course, what is the purpose of this if you don't have it on a page? Now, one of the tricky things about the JavaScript in page controls is every time that a new data is fetched from the database, it's going to refresh this page JavaScript. Everything gets refreshed in the page. So we can't declare our timers in the page JavaScript because it's going to reset every time that new data is sent. So we actually have to make our timers global, and that's just a simple thing. And actually I have leftover code here. from when I was testing it. And I have 2 timers already declared in the global. Var countdown equals null, var stopwatch equals null. Those are going to be the 2 timers that we're using since we have 2 timers up here. Okay, so now let's have our page. And we're going to go to edit, and we're going to keep this simple. We're going to say countdown div class. And let's see, we're going to call this countdown. There we go. Let's start with the countdown. And now if we go to our page, it's just going to say countdown, and there's no clock. There's no countdown actually there because we haven't populated the data yet. And that's what we're going to do right now in this JavaScript. I'm actually going to right-click on new tab so that we get this on a new page. All right, so intervals are global, as I said before, and every time that we get new data, it's going to refresh this. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that the old data is wiped out. Countdown. All right. So this is just going to clear the clock on the countdown timer. And there's a reason for it. I'm not going to get into specifics about it, but just know that, just do it. It's going to make it easier. All right. So on this, we had a field called countdown, and that's where we're going to populate our data. So let's go find our field called countdown, and let's edit the text of it, and let's take the data for, well, if we right click and inspect and look at the console, we can see the data we received. One is called watch, the other is called count. We're doing count first, and it has 3 pieces of data for count: count E, count O, and count S. Count S is just the state of the counter. Is it running? Yes or no, 1 or 0. If it's running, it'll be 1. Count O is the offset. Offset is the starting time. So we put it at 30 minutes, and 30 minutes is 1.8 million milliseconds. 1.8 million milliseconds is the offset because that's 30 minutes. And then count E is the time since epoch that we started the clock. And that's generally how this is going to calculate where it knows the clock was started and manage to keep this in sync across the internet, because epoch is an atomic time since January 1st, 1970. It's something used across the internet. So we just have those 3 pieces of information, and we will have it. So first thing we're going to do is take doc data and just put the starting time. Whoops, typo. Just put the starting time into the clock. And it didn't. Did I do this right? Doc data count O. Class countdown. Doc data count. Oh, I put 0 instead of O. There we go. All right, so now it has the offset, which is 30 minutes of start time. Now, naturally, 1.8 million is not a readable format, so we have to write a script that converts into a readable format. So I'm going to call that function calc timer. And we're going to pass into that the time. And this is where the math gets complicated. So let's let neg equals time less than 0. And this is for a simple purpose because it's a countdown. Occasionally you could get to negative time. So this is just going to be to put a negative symbol in front of it if we get to negative time. And time equals the absolute time of time divided by 1000. This is because we don't actually need milliseconds. We only need seconds. So, I mean, nobody reads time in milliseconds. They read them in seconds. So we're just going to divide it by 1,000. Okay, and now we're going to do some calculations to get hours. The hours left on the clock would be math floor. We're going to floor the time and divide the time by 3,600, which is the number of seconds in an hour. And we're going to convert that to a string. And we're going to pad the hours so that we always get two numbers in the hour. And if there's less than two numbers in the hour, it'll just append a 0 to the end. So instead of getting 1 for an hour, we'll get 0, 1 for an hour. And we're going to do the same thing to calculate the minutes. That will be math.floor time modulus 3,600. This we need to know that after the hours are sliced off, we need to calculate what's left over, which is what a modulus is. It just says what's left over after 3,600 is divided. So we're going to get the modulus of that, and then we're going to divide that by 60 because there's 60 seconds in a minute. And just like before, I'm just going to cut and paste. We're going to convert that to a string and pad it with zeros. And then for seconds, we're going to do, again, similar. Take the time, number of time, the remainder of seconds. We're going to convert it to a fixed number because we want to get 1 decimal point afterwards. If you want to get more than 1 decimal point, you can convert it to multiple decimal points. But we're going to want 1. And then convert that to a string. Whoops. I'm really bad at typing while looking at the screen at the same time because I'm looking at multiple screens because I got my scratch pad on the other computer. And then we're going to pad this with 4 characters because it's not just going to be 2 numbers. It's going to be 2 numbers and a decimal point and then the 0 at the end or after the decimal point. So just pad it with 4 numbers and again, the front facing 0. And then we're going to return the negative or positive status, the hours, the separator, minutes, separator, and then seconds. And then we're going to wrap the start of the timer with the call to that function. And now when we refresh, it'll say countdown 30 minutes instead of 1800. And thankfully, we're going to use this function multiple times, so we won't have to write it again. All right. Now, the clock is actually running right now, but it's not showing as it running here because we haven't actually started any runners. This interval we're talking about before, the countdown, that's your runner. And we haven't started it yet. So let's check to see doc data count S. And S, as I said before, is the state of the timer. S tells us if the timer is running or not. So if it's running, if it will be running if the count is greater than 0. All right. Then we're going to start the countdown. Well, define the countdown. Countdown equals a new interval, set interval. And we're going to run that in an anonymous function. I hate how JavaScript does this. All right. And we want this interval to run every 100 milliseconds. If we wanted to run faster, we could do every 10 milliseconds, and then we can get more accurate decimal points, but there's no real reason to have it run faster than that. So we're going to do it every 1/10 of a second. It's going to run the counter. And this is a countdown. So let's do our time equals parse int. See, one of the downsides is this data, even though it looks like an integer, is actually strings. So we have to calculate it as an integer. So parse int doc data, the countdown since epoch, which I explained what it is before, plus int doc data, the countdown offset, so the starting time essentially, and then subtract from it the current time as received from your computer. And we're going to take that time and do exactly what we did here. Countdown text, calc timer, and the calculated time. And we click save on that. And now when we refresh, data is not defined. That is because that is supposed to be date, not data. And there we go. Now we can see the countdown is ticking. 18 minutes left and 5 seconds. And that is about accurate to over here. And we can pause. And if we go back to here, we can see it has paused at the same exact time, 17:59.1. We can reset it, and it's back to 30. We can start it again, and the countdown is automatically updated. And I can edit this countdown from any computer that I'm at, multiple browser windows from my cell phone, and it will work. Now, stopwatch. Now, stopwatch is slightly different. But the first thing we do is let's add the stopwatch. And let's do the JavaScript for this. And like before, we're going to want to clear the interval of the stopwatch. Oh, don't edit that here, edit there, edit here. All right. Stopwatch. And we're going to do the same thing we did here with stopwatch. Get the default text, which is watch. I believe that's what I named it. Watch. Yes, watch. And now we need this. If we refresh this, we're going to see that we have the stopwatch, but it hasn't been started because it only has the initialization and no runner. So let's create a new runner for the stopwatch. I'm going to cut and paste the runner we used for the countdown because it is similar. But let's go if watch state greater than 0, stopwatch set interval function, stopwatch calc timer. Now this is going to be a change here because stopwatches count ups and count downs are different. A stopwatch is that count up. So for the countdown, we did the epoch plus the offset minus the current time. But for a stopwatch, it's going to be a bit different. What we're going to do is we're going to take the current time and we're going to add the, we're going to subtract the epoch and then add the offset. And it's just a different order of subtraction and addition of the numbers. And we're going to click save on that. And when we refresh, we're going to see we have the stopwatch running. It's up to 32 minutes. No, that's not right. I calculated something wrong. Yes, I did, because this is supposed to be watch epoch and watch offset. Haha. There you go. And now we refresh, and we can see we have 1630, reset it, and it's back to 0. And that's it. That's very easy. That's how you do timers. Now, if you want, you can add multiple stopwatches, and then there are convenient buttons here to start all the stopwatches at the same time. So let's say you have 4 people running a race against each other. You can start all their timers on almost the exact same time. They may be off by a few milliseconds, microseconds here and there, but generally it's going to be pretty accurate. It's all about how fast you can get the data pushed through the internet. Anyways, here's your timers, and they're finally back in Scoreboard Assistant. If you have any questions, of course, just let me know. Peace out.